Mega Drive boy, now we're talking. The second console I ever had and a real little banger. I had the Mark I and I still own this little beauty to this day. No red rings of death here. It's one I still remember fondly and still pick up and play on regularly. But alright then boy, I am LetemcomeInit and this is my top nostalgic Mega Drive games list. And as with all games in this series, this is not a best of list, it is a list of games that I personally find nostalgic. So do let me know your picks in the comments below. Now, let's be cheeky and kick things off with a multiple game cartridge. Sega definitely had a habit of banding games together on their systems, and here's a fine example. Whilst not being the best set of 3 games, it did come with the console for me, which we got second hand again, so it's going to make this list. And before we get into the games, one thing that is still burned into my memory as of 2018 is the cart's weird, slightly Fiesta-esque kind of sounding theme tune. Only released in Europe, it contained 3 Sega classics, 2 arcade games, Super Thunderblade, as a child probably my least favourite of the bunch, though there is something slightly satisfying about dodging bullets and gunning the ever-living hell out of bad guys with infinite ammo. It still feels like an unfair coin-gobbling challenge to this day though. Alien Storm, your side-scrolling beat-em-up with guns. Best part of this is these interesting little shoot-em-up stages in between, and that's not saying much. These guys look like gremlins. Unfortunately, back in the day, I had a sheltered mate who was only allowed to play educational games, who insisted on playing this game and this game only when he came round mine. Ruined an already crappy game for me. Bollocks to you, Peter. And finally, Super Monaco GP. This game was tough, but my granddad was an F1 nut, so I spent a fair bit of time on this one, though I did develop a tactic to winning. Pick your rival you want to beat, find them on the grid, then smash into them, sending them skidding off the track in a ball of smoke and fire, all whilst your granddad yells "foul play" in the background. Now, here was a game that I hated as a kid and still don't find all that amusing now. Looney Tunes games are always a bit weird, but one thing that I have to give this one is that it looks graphically tight. A really flawless representation of the show and a fine display indeed. The controls, however, are all over the bloody shop with this one, and I'd always be bumping into, off of, and around the levels getting whacked, bitten and smacked. And without fail, I would always reach this level, get beaten and eaten the crap out of by Frank and bloody Tweety here, get pissed off and or scared and turn the bloody game off.
19.
Back to another game that I didn't like, but is a real nostalgia trip for me, is Olympics Gold 92. And yeah, it's a nice touch that you had so many languages to choose from, but all that happened is I would end up being crap at all the events in a different language. It also looks like the crowd has been swapped out for an old people's home. I was crap at the running, crap at the shot put, crap at archery, well, not quite as crap now, and crap at swimming. Crap, 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 crap. But nostalgia crap. Sidewalk Justice. One I've always thought was called Cyborgs Justice, but whatever. It's one of those Alex Kidd / Alex the Kid things. Now, the 2 best things about this game were 1. Building your cyborg, and 2. Ripping other cyborgs to pieces like a mad mechanical psycho. Unfortunately, the gameplay is a little repetitive, and the soundtrack is really flat on return, as once you've beaten your way through one level, you've beaten them all. No, that's not a new level, mate, that is just a recolour. This game gets marginally more entertaining with 2 players, but like I say, 1. Build a badass cyborg, and 2. Rip apart other cyborgs. As a kid, I seemed to wind up with a lot of Taz games, despite never having expressed any sympathy or interest in the mad bastard. At least this is better than the Master System game I owned. Shameless plug for that nostalgic top 10 here. Visually, yes, this is another spot-on game, looking undeniably gloriously like the cartoon. However, all I really remember about this one is bouncing around like a madman and getting belted from every enemy in sight. I never escaped Mars as a kid, and I couldn't be asked to escape it as an adult either. Though on replay it does house some really interesting later levels, as a kid I never even made it past the second bloomin' boss. 16. General Chaos, a different kettle of fish entirely. A really interesting little strategy title with its great sense of humour and its colourful and playful graphics. I've spoken about this game in a couple of other videos, but it deserves the exposure, being a somewhat rarely mentioned title. And not to mention a bloody expensive one in some bloomin' places too. I love the cheeky thumpy wartime theme tune, the silly gameplay mechanics and graphics, and it's really one that stuck with me over the years. The only thing that did seem a bit unfair was that after beating General Harrick once, the AI comes back at you like a lagerlout on bag, and pummels your ass mercilessly like a lagerlout on bag, I guess would. Sonic, 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 Sonic. Now, breathe easy, any ardent obsessive Sonic fans, and withhold those aneurysms you are planning on having at non-inclusion of this blue hedgehog. He does make this list. But let me explain. Yes, I'm not denying this game is nostalgic to me with some brilliantly composed, if not some of the finest tunes on the system. Game-changing speed and gameplay and iconic feel and look. But my first Sonic game was the 8-bit rendition on the Master System. So my nostalgic red boots are filled over there. Not to mention that anyone growing up that came round that didn't have a Sega system would want to play this one game to death. I mean, even as a kid, there was only so many times I could watch someone progress through Green Hill Zone only to die in Labyrinth Zone, whilst I secretly and Britishly cursed them inside my own head. Well, alright, well, maybe once more then. Road Rash. Now, who doesn't like the idea of braining someone with a pole or a chain, all the while speeding along on a 2-wheel death machine at 200 miles an hour? Ah, yeah, O'Reilly doesn't that too. Off the top of my head, it's the only motorbike combat franchise I know of, or at least that did it bloody right then. Yes, this was another Neighbour Next Door game. I have most of the games in this series after number 1, but this is where I fell in love with it. The box art is particularly nostalgic for me, and the opening graphics still look brilliantly dangerous and cool today. And picking this up today and smashing O'Reilly's face in with a bat still feels right now, all these years later. And who said violent video games make violent people? Bollocks to ya. LOL. Lemmings, another classic I've waxed lyrical about in the past, but again, for good reason. These guys are the epitome of iconic, being firmly cemented in my mind with their green St. Patrick's Day wigs and blue potato sack clothes. Though the little blighters have infected many systems over the years, the MegaDrive was my first taste, and first and foremost, the thing I always remember best about this game was the stunning soundtrack. Hands down, some of my favourite tracks and skillful compositions the system has to offer. Married perfectly to the more hard-hitting and grungy sound card of the MegaDrive, some of these tracks are positively stomping. So much so, I've spliced them into several band van CDs and play them very loudly whilst drunk. Aside from my nostalgic reasons though, you can't deny this game's place in gaming history, nostalgia or otherwise, and it's a franchise I would love to see resurrected for modern gaming or tablets. racing games, and another undeniably nostalgic pick for me, and all-round brilliant game and series is Micro Machines. Though most people are more familiar with the Turbo Tournament 2, Turbo Tournament 96 was my first game. Some of these games in the series even came with Micro Machine party invitations, though sadly I never received any of these invitations. Bastards. I have an undying love for this franchise. Much like my burning hatred for what happened to the Dungeon Keeper one. No! There really is nothing better than plugging in 4 controllers into the cart and pushing your mates off various tables, lab desks and benches to their doom. Wee twat.
11.
Now, I'll level with you. I was no good at this game as a kid, and I think I may even be slightly worse at it as an adult now. I don't know what I'm doing with this game. But that's not why it makes the list. What I remember best and most nostalgically about this game was the pure beauty of it. Luscious deep blues and mystifying underwater tones, the ocean shimmer and the playful inquisitive nature of dolphins. As a child, I developed a fascination and deep love for the ocean, one contributed at very least partly due to Ecco the Dolphin. The controls are as fluid as the water you flow through here, and the sound effects and soundtrack add to a sense of underwater atmosphere. Ecco the Dolphin really does stand out amongst the MegaDrive library as one that has its own feel and completely unique atmosphere. I don't even need to stress myself out by attempting later levels with this brilliant little pool you can hang around in. Bugger. Now, come on, one of my most beloved consoles, it's got to be a two-parter. Far too many nostalgic games not to be, both good and bad. So tune in to part 2 to find out the top 10. But what about some of your top nostalgic Mega Drive games? Do let me know your picks in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed this episode, do subscribe for more content. And for some extra special content and rewards, do check out my Patreon here. I've been LetemcomeInit, a thank you and good night.